Hi everyone, hope you've all had a lovely week. I've got a reading that I'm going to share with you today, and that's on the Gareth Williams case. Now this case is really unusual. I'm going to say before I start though that this is for entertainment purposes only, my thoughts and opinions, it's not fact. Now as I said, this case is really unusual, and back at the time when it happened in the UK it was widely known as the spy in the bag case. So Gareth was only 31 years old and he was found dead on the 23rd of August 2010. He'd been working at he'd been working at GCHQ since 2001, and he was on secondment to MI6 when he died in 2010. Again, really unusual circumstances. He wasn't found until a week or so after he died. It was unusual because he'd had about three meetings at least at work, and no one had bothered to check to see if he was okay when he hadn't turned in. When the police actually went round to check his apartment, they found a phone that had been put back into factory settings. Gareth was found inside a bag, a holdall bag, inside the bath. The heating was turned up around the apartment. There were no fingerprints on the padlock, and the bag was padlocked from the outside, and there was no fingerprints on the zipper. Gareth wasn't wearing any gloves, and the key to the padlock was tucked underneath him in the bag. As well as that, the fingerprints around the bathtub and footprints in the bathroom, there wasn't actually that many there. It was as though the bathroom had been cleaned down, because you would have expected Gareth to have at least touched a wall or something to get himself into such a small space. So a lot of the forensics, the experts, believe he was put into the bag alive, but then he was moved into the bath. The coroner ruled that this was an unlawful death, most likely criminal activity, yet the Metropolitan Police said that he'd managed to get himself into the bag and lock it, and it was a misadventure. So going into the case, the first thing that comes up is all this stuff to do with travel. So we've got travel, road, overseas, and with this, what I keep getting is that it's not just the MI6 connection. I keep on feeling as though something happened at this conference. He went to a DEFCON conference a couple of weeks before his death, but something happened there. I get a really strong overseas connection to this, and I feel like there's a really strong female energy around it. And I've also got these cards, so like the overseas connection, we've got the Four of Swords, so there's this rest, recuperation element to it. We've also got the Four of Wands with that as well, so it's like, you know, he's having a good time, he's relaxing, he doesn't actually feel as though, well, he doesn't feel as though he's got anything to worry about, and that's clarified by this card. And I'm struck by the sand on this one, which I will come to a bit later, but he's basically there, he's having a lovely time, and he doesn't feel he's got anything to be concerned about whilst he's away. Now, whilst he's away, I've got this. Now, outer space, it's more to do with what I would say is cyberspace, security, that kind of thing. And then there's also this suspicious activity. So something's went on at this conference. I don't think, as I said, because Gareth doesn't feel he's in any danger, he doesn't feel anything's gone wrong. It's very inadvertent. He doesn't know what he's done to either, I don't know, blow his cover, what he's done to someone for them to figure out who he is and what he's doing there. But I do also have this from whilst he's away. Now, you have all this group activity that's going on these conferences, I'm sure, but I've got this. So there's two crimes connected here. Obviously, there's Gareth's death, and there's something else. There's another crime which this actually stems from. And again, the three with the group activity, we also have these accomplices. So there's more than one person. There's more than one person involved from start to finish in this, and I feel that quite strongly. Now, what keeps coming out whilst he's away is this card, and it's like something's being asked. I feel as though Gareth's somehow been approached. He's been asked to do something, he's been asked for expertise in something, and it's like he's inadvertently given away something about himself, or he's been asked a question that could get some people into serious trouble and they've realised who he was afterwards. But I feel as though there's this approach being made to him at this conference. I've also got here with the ask that there was money, a lot of money, quite a substantial amount of money involved. And I feel as though whatever they knew about him or whatever they found out about him, they felt as though they could offer him a large amount of money because they felt as though he wasn't getting enough. Now, going back to the fact that he worked for GCHQ on secondment to MI6, now I'm not sure of the exact salaries, but they're not huge salaries. And I'm bringing it up now as well because in Gareth's wardrobe, in his clothes, things like that, there was this designer clothes that were quite new, and they said there was about £20,000 worth. I don't know if someone on a salary like Gareth's would be able to just go out and buy stuff like that, whether or not he had, you know, money from his family, inheritance. There could have been all kinds of reasons why he had this money, but he clearly did have a lot of money to spend, and for whatever reason these people didn't feel as though he had that much. And when I'm saying, you know, it's a lot of money for someone on Gareth's salary, I'm not trying to say that he was doing anything wrong. I'm just saying it was a lot of money for someone on a salary from GCHQ. Even if he was at like 100,000 a year, 20 grand to just go and spend on women's designer clothes is quite a lot. But moving on. Anyway, he's been asked to do something. They didn't think he had the money that he clearly did. And then we have this confrontation here. Now we've got the conflict, the strength card, and we've got quite a few problems around Gareth, but I feel as though this happens once he gets back into the UK. I feel as though he's constantly watching over his shoulder, and it's not just to do with work. I feel like there's this extra element that's running through this case, and it's not all, you know, spies and cloaks and daggers. I feel as though there is actually a criminal element to this rather than just a foreign intelligence service. And again, we have this female, and she keeps on coming out quite a lot. I feel as though she's slightly older than Gareth, or slightly older than he was at the time. I feel like there's a group of them, there's not just this woman, but she's a really significant character in this. Now, with what happened to him, ultimately we have this drugged or poisoned. Now, it could be the carbon monoxide poisoning that's coming out here, but I do feel as though he was drugged somehow once he got, and that's how he got into the bag. That's why he got into the bag, possibly, but there's all this like drugged there, some sort of substance that's given to him. Why he got into the bag specifically, and I did lay some cards on this one. I went through sort of several different questions. The first one was what happened generally, why did he get into the bag? And what I have here, the first one is this, so inside job. Now this could be, there was talk, I'm not sure if it's true because it was never confirmed anywhere, I think it was on Wikipedia or something like that, but there was talk, and it was to do with Gareth being undercover and trying to, you know, he'd made contact with certain people, and he was undercover at the DEF CON conference trying to infiltrate hacking groups. So it could be that he managed that, and that's why it's coming out the inside job. I'm not really feeling as though it was MI6. I feel as though this was more criminal. And what I have here is a choice. So someone said to him, there's this choice. And when he got into the bag, there were two choices here. I feel like he was threatened with someone, possibly a family member or whatever, but he was given two choices, and one of them was to get into the bag. But either way, you know, this was coming. Either way, he knew or suspected that he was going to die. I'd say it's quite a strong indication. He knew he was going to die, and that's when he got into the bag. But I feel as though he was going along with things to try and save someone else, possibly a family member or someone that he loved, someone that he cared for. Again, in with the bag, we have this card. So we've got something that's in his blood, some sort of toxin, some sort of substance that's gone into him. And these. So there's this male there too. I don't believe that this female was alone. So we have the male, things happen swiftly. I feel like he was quite brutal too. He said it's this or this. Organised crime. And again, I do feel like it's more crime than anything else. And we have this, the wooded area, and that's telling me this is really quite shady. The people operate well below the radar. I do keep feeling as though this is something to do with technology. Why get in the bag still? We have this. So we have the High Priestess. Again, I'm getting this really strong female energy, but this is telling me that Gareth knows something. I'm not even sure if he knew what it was that got him killed, because there are lots of people who work at GCHQ, who work at MI6, who work in these kinds of intelligence services, but there are very few that, you know, someone that would know something that someone would want to kill for. And I have this, the surveillance card. Now that's telling me that Gareth was being watched over. I feel as though this was prior, and there were rumours that he'd actually spoke to his employers. He felt like he was being watched, but ultimately someone was there and they made sure that he got into that bag. It somehow, it feels a little like he thought that he could play along, get into the bag, and then maybe sort of get himself out of the situation. But because they'd turned the heating up and the oxygen had dropped so quickly, I feel as though they stood around, cleaned up and made sure he was dead before they left. Again, things go back to this. So I'm getting deeply involved in water. So it's something that I feel he was deeply involved in. And I keep on getting the desert. So that keeps on drawing me back to Las Vegas. But I also feel that the people, the criminal organisation, they're somewhere where there could be deserts, so possibly Middle East. I don't feel a Russian connection that was talked about, and I don't feel as though this is a professional intelligence services either. Before I move on to, you know, sort of why his employers didn't contact, or sorry, who was there specifically. Again, we've got this female card and this life insurance card that came out. Now these two, again, this is why he got in the bag. And I'm not sure if it was a sister or a friend, but possibly a mother even. But someone was threatened and he's got in the bag to protect them, to make sure that they're safe. Now, moving on as to who was there. The person, you know, this one, he knew them. He knew this person, he'd met them before. And again, I feel as though it's at the conference. I also get the Empress again. So we have this significant female and the cult card. Now this is all quite shadowy. So there were a couple of people there. I feel like possibly 3, definitely 2, possibly 3. 1 male, 1 female, and possibly another male. But they were there and he was given choices. They're the ones who gave him this choice. But the female is the really significant one in all of this. Now, obviously, why didn't work phone him? Because if anyone else had been missing for a week, if you'd missed 3 meetings at work that could have been quite important, you'd think that someone would want to know, that someone would check up on you. And what I have is this. So there's the cleanup card. And I don't feel as though this is specifically done purely to cover over what happened to Gareth. I feel as though there were certain things he could have been involved in. They didn't want getting into the wrong hands. They didn't want printed in the newspaper. There could have been a national security risk. But I do feel as though they left what they could without revealing what he was working on. And even though I feel as though there's this loose link to Gareth's work, again, I'm not really feeling this intelligence, Russian spy kind of route. I feel as though this is more of a criminal organisation. He's been asked to do something by a significant woman, he's either said no or he's let something slip, and it's inadvertently give his identity up, and these people know now that they're in trouble for asking, and that's why this has happened. That's why he's died. Now, whilst they've been doing the cleanup, there's also this DNA evidence. I don't know why they would want to remove it. I do feel as though they collected DNA evidence, and I'm not sure how things like that work. Would they do their own inquiries? Would they look up to things? But I feel as though there has been some form of justice. I don't feel like this woman's been caught, but I feel at least one of them has. I feel like the younger male has possibly been caught. As well with work, we have these two. So we have this see only love card. So I'm not saying that Gareth was doing anything shady, anything dodgy, but they wanted only one side of him to be shown, and you know, possibly quite selfishly, one side of working for them to be shown. You don't want it all over the papers that someone's been killed from the intelligence services, because then, you know, who's going to want to work there? And again, with this one, I feel as though they've made decisions to keep certain things back. So I do feel as though it was on the 23rd that they went over and things were taken, things were done. But I don't feel as though it was like this cover up where they left him to just rot for a week. I feel as though it's probably, they got the phone call, they went, they wiped certain things, possibly the phone, possibly something else, and obviously there's something there to do with DNA. But I don't feel as though they were like, oh, let's leave him for a week and, you know, wait till someone phones up about him. I feel as though it was more just tidying things up. Now, ultimately, the main reasons I'm getting for Gareth's passing, the first one, naivety. He'd been at GCHQ, but when he went to MI6, I get this overwhelming feeling that he didn't really know what he was getting himself into, and there are reports that he wanted to go back to GCHQ. This really wasn't for him. And I also have this draining card, which often indicates some sort of blood money, that again takes me away from the intelligence services and into a criminal organisation. I do feel as though like he's basically been caught out in something, not through his own fault, completely unwittingly, but this has led to him passing. Now, in terms of the future, you know, will anything change? Will anything come out? And unfortunately, I don't feel as though it will. So the first one I have is the cover up card. That's already been done. There's a cover up in the sense that a lot of things have gone missing from the work that Gareth was doing. The people who gave him the choices, told him to get in the bag, they've covered their tracks quite well too. I also get this social media card, and I feel as though along with the cover up, there's always going to be a different rumour on social media, but I feel as though certain things were intentionally put out to the public to try and skew the case, to try and get people to see him in a different light. Again, I get this Empress card and a group involvement. So in the future, who knows, maybe someone will identify that there was a female and group involved in it, but I don't feel as though that's going to be made public. And again, I've got that, you know, he was moved to make it look like, I don't even feel as though they wanted it to look like he'd done it to himself. I feel as though it was more obvious someone else had done it, but for whatever reason, people think it's better to let everyone in his family think it happened naturally. But I do feel as though this was a really, really sad case, and it did all come down to just an element of naivety. It started overseas, and it started with a question, sort of someone being recruited, someone being asked something, and then he's inadvertently let slip because he's quite new to this, or, you know, whatever he was doing. But yeah, really, really sad case, that one. I do hope that Gareth's family get the answers they're looking for one day, but I can't see it happen anytime soon. Maybe in years to come, everything will be revealed then, but I don't feel he was the person that they tried to make out he was in the press, in the paper. It was just something to make a narrative fit at the time, which is really, really sad too.